Hey guys, my name is Mark, and today we will be looking at Ready Player Me and how we can integrate one of their avatars into our Massive Loop platform. Now, Ready Player Me is a cross-game avatar platform for Unity, Unreal Engine, and all web-based stacks. The pipeline we'll be following will start with Ready Player Me, it'll move into Blender, and then end up at Unity with a little bit of Photoshop in between. So in order for you to complete this workflow, you will need to make sure you have access to those applications. So to get started, let's go ahead and open up our browser and go to readyplayer.me. If you do not have an account with Ready Player Me, I encourage you to go ahead and sign up and create one. Ready Player Me's UI design is easy to follow and makes creating an avatar fun and easy. Now, I have already created an account, so I'm going to go ahead and sign into mine. Once you're logged in, you will be prompted to start creating some avatars of your own. Since I've already created some avatars, I can go ahead and select on My Avatars. Here we can see a collection of thumbnails, each thumbnail depicting an avatar that has been created. So let's go ahead and choose one to export. Now I'm kind of leaning towards the guy with the yellow shirt and the spiky hair. So I'm going to go ahead and find the 3 vertical dots in the upper right corner of his thumbnail and click on them. Here we'll see a couple of different ways to export our avatar. The first option is download avatar.glb. This option will allow us to download a completely rigged avatar. However, in our case, we want our avatars to not only be rigged, but also have blend shapes and positioned in a T-pose. Now for this to happen, we will need to click on the option copy.glb URL. Once we select it, Ready Player Me will prompt us that the URL has been copied successfully, and now we are ready to download our character. So let's go back to our browser. Let's go ahead and open up another window. In the address bar, we can select Ctrl-V on our keyboard. This will paste our recently copied URL in there. To be sure we pasted the correct URL, it should end with a .glb. Now at this point, if we hit enter, we will begin downloading the rigged avatar through our browser. However, if we want our avatar to come with blend shapes and a T-pose, we need to add a little bit more text. So let's go to the end of the URL and let's type $morph targets. I'm going to hit the equal sign, Oculus, %, 20, Vizims, comma, mouth open, comma, eyes closed, and signed, pose, equal sign, and T. Once we have that typed in, let's hit enter. We should see our models begin to download. If we click on the download icon, we should see a list of our downloaded files. Let's click on the show file in folder icon. This will open up a window showing us where our file is being downloaded to. Here we can rename our file, and I'm going to call it blaze.glb. I'm also going to go to my C drive and create a new folder to keep everything in. And I'm also going to call it Blaze. Now let's drag our blaze.glb into our newly created Blaze folder. And at that point, we should be ready to bring our avatar into Blender. Okay, before we get started, let's go ahead and clean up our scene by deleting the light, the cube, the camera, and the collection. Next, let's select File, Import, GLTF.2.0. And now we can browse to our avatar.glb file. We're going to select it and hit Import. We should see our avatar appear in the scene. Let's go ahead and change the viewport to Material Preview mode. Now this will allow us to see our textures in the viewport. They should look pretty good. Okay, let's go ahead and check out our model. First thing we can see is that he is in a T-pose. Let's go ahead and expand the armature arrow. We can see he is a rigged character, and he is made up of about 10 pieces of separate geometry, with each of those pieces containing its own material. If we select his head and go to the data properties, we can see he does have his blend shapes, also known as shape keys in Blender. And so far, it looks like it exported with everything we needed. So let's get him ready for Massive Loop. The first thing we'll tackle is making his T-pose the default pose. Currently, he has two poses. He has a T-pose, which we see, and an A-pose, which we do not see. If we select on the armature and change over to pose mode, we can hit the tab key and see him transition back and forth from A-pose to T-pose. To change the default pose, let's go to Object Mode. Let's select his shirt and open up the Modifier tab. Next to the camera icon, there is a drop-down arrow. Open that up and select Duplicate. Let's select the drop-down arrow again, and let's hit Apply. Now, if Blender does not allow you to apply the change, it's possible there may be some shape keys on the geometry. In that case, we will have to go into the data properties and remove them by selecting the minus icon next to them. We can then go back to the Modifier tab and hit Apply again. We will need to repeat these steps for the hands, pants, shoes, and body. Now I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while I finish these up, and when I return, we will continue with setting up our character's default pose. Okay, our model should now look as if it's being stretched and deformed in a weird way. That's okay, we can fix this. Let's select our armature. Let's go ahead and switch back to pose mode. Let's navigate over to Pose, Apply, and Apply Pose as Rest Pose. We should now see our avatar's mesh pop into its T-pose position. Now will be a perfect time to save our file. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and in my C directory, I'm going to the Blaze folder, and I'm going to call this file Blaze as well. Okay, the next step is fairly straightforward. We are going to reduce our geometry count by combining them all together as one. Let's go ahead and change into Object Mode. Let's select all of our character's geometry and let's hit Ctrl-J on the keyboard. We should see the multiple geometry being combined into one piece. If you need to rename it, go ahead and double left mouse click on the name and change it to whatever describes your character's geometry the best. In my case, I'm going to rename mine to Blaze. Okay, now that we have combined the geometry, let's also look at combining material and textures as well. To do this, we are going to need to open our browser and install a plugin called Principal Baker Master. Now we can find this plugin at GitHub. I've already went ahead and opened its page up in my browser, but to make things easy for you, you will find a link to it in the description below. Now we're going to select Code, Download Zip. Okay, let's jump back into Blender and go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and Install. Let's go ahead and navigate to the zip file we just downloaded, and we're going to say Install Add-on. Let's make sure we check the box next to it to activate it, and we should be ready to go. Okay, let's start off by selecting our geometry. Let's open up the Data Properties tab, and under the Shape keys, we can see a category called UV Maps. Let's expand it. We should now see a UV set called UV Map. Let's go ahead and create a new UV set by hitting the plus icon. We should now see a new set appear. Let's left mouse double click on it and rename it to UV Map Combined. Oh, that's perfect. Now let's go ahead and hit the camera icon next to it to make it active. And now whatever changes we make to the UVs should be reflected in our UV Map Combined. let's go ahead and add a new viewport. Now I'm going to go over to the border of our viewport. Once I see the cursor change to a plus sign, we can drag in the direction we want a new window to appear. Let's switch it to the UV editor. Once done, let's go ahead and switch into edit mode. Let's go to our character and select some vertices. Once you selected some, go ahead and hit A to select them all. And now we should see all the UVs being displayed in the UV editor. Now it is quite messy because we're seeing all the UVs, what used to be separate geometries, stacked on top of each other. So with the UV map combined selected, let's go to UV and unwrap. We should see all our UVs layout. Now let's go ahead and change our margin to 0.008. And now that we have our new UVs layout, let's go ahead and bake our existing texture onto it. First, let's make UV map render active by clicking on its camera icon. Let's then open up the shader editor. On the right side, we should see a tab for the Principal Baker plugin we installed earlier. If you do not see any tabs, that's okay. Hit in on your keyboard to reveal them. Let's go to the Principal Baker tab and open it up. Now I'm going to select single batch. We'll uncheck auto detect and we'll go ahead and click detect. Once you do this, Principal Baker should show you a list of all the maps that were found connected to this model. Next, we need to select what size of map we are wanting to generate. So let's go to Output Settings, Bake Settings, and let's select 2048 or a 2K map. Now we could go 4K, but we're kind of trying to stay optimized so we can get a better performance. Last but not least, if we look at the top of the Principal Baker plugin, we should see a note saying to set render engine to cycles. So I'm going to open up the render tab and we're going to change the render engine from Eevee to cycles. Perfect. And now we can jump back into Principal Baker, and at the top we can see a button called Bake. Go ahead and select that. Once you do, your maps will start to bake and they will be saved into the same directory your file is saved in. Now let's go ahead and start wrapping things up by going into object mode. Opening the material tab. We're going to find our materials and we can see a little minus sign beside them. Let's start hitting the minus icon to delete them since we will not be needing them anymore. When we are done, let's hit new. This will add a new shader to our avatar. In the shader editor, let's select add, texture, image texture. We're going to hit open. I will select my new color PNG that we baked out and open image and assign it to the base color channel. We should see in the viewport that our avatar is looking kind of strange. This is completely normal. Let's open up the data properties and let's select the UV map combined camera icon to active render. We should now see our avatar's color map being properly displayed. Great. Since everything is working, we can go ahead and select UV map and hit the minus icon to delete it. Let's double click on UV map combine and let's rename it to the default name of UV map. Now, if you want, you are more than welcome to hook up the rest of your maps to your model's material to see what it would look like. But since Unity wants the roughness map to be in the alpha channel of the metallic map, I'm going to go ahead and skip that part and go straight to the export. To do this, we will start off by selecting our armature. We'll go to File, Export, FBX. We will change forward to Z forward. Make sure the file name and location is correct and hit Export FBX. If we go to our directory, we can see the FBX we just exported has been created and is ready to bring into Unity. Okay, here I got my Unity opened. I am currently using version 2020.3.35 F1. Now to keep things organized, let's go ahead and go into the assets folder and create a new folder. Now I'm going to, you guessed it, keep it the same name as my file. I'm going to call it Blaze. Let's open that folder. Right mouse button, click on it, and find Import New Asset. Let's go ahead and browse to our FBX file and click Import. Let's select our FBX. And in the inspector, let's open up the Rig tab. Okay, we need to change the animation type from generic to humanoid. And we're going to hit Apply. We're next going to drag our asset up into the scene. Once we do that, under the Transform node, click on the More Options icon and select Reset. This should zero out all your avatar's transform values. Now let's go ahead and go to our main folder. We're going to create a new folder in there. Let's name it Textures. In Windows, let's open up a separate window and navigate to our baked textures. Once found, we can drag and drop them into our Textures folder. In the Textures folder, let's create a new material. We will name it to correspond to our model. So I'm going to call mine Blaze_MAT. With the material still selected, navigate to the top of the inspector window. We can select the lock icon to lock this window. This will make it a lot easier for us to assign the texture maps to their material. Start off by selecting the color map. Let's drag and drop it into the albedo channel. Next, let's select the normal map and assign it to the normal channel. You may get a pop-up asking you to fix normals. If you see this message, go ahead and click Fix. The last two maps are the metallic and the roughness maps. These will have to be combined in order for Unity to read them correctly. I'm going to use Photoshop to do this. If you do not have Photoshop, there are numerous third-party softwares that you can find that can do this online. So in our Project tab, let's go to the metallic map. I'm going to right mouse click on it and select Show in Explorer. Now this will show us where our Unity files are being stored for our project. Let's find the metallic map again. I'm going to right mouse click on it and select Open With. A list of softwares should pop up to choose from. I'm going to select Photoshop. Great, Photoshop should load up and we should be able to see our metallic map. Now, in the Layers window, there should be a layer called Layer 0. At the bottom of this window, there should also be an option to add a mask to our layer. Let's click on that. We should now see a new layer get created and linked next to our Layer 0. This is the mask layer we just created to be our alpha channel. Let's go get our roughness map. We're going to click on File, Open, and go ahead and select your roughness map. Once it opens, we can select everything by hitting Control A and then copy it by hitting Control C on the keyboard. Let's go back to our metallic map. Now in the Layers window, we are going to open up the Channels tab. At the bottom, you can see our Layers mask. Let's turn the mask visibility to on and turn the RGB visibility to off. Let's select the mask layer and hit Control V. That should copy our roughness map into our mask layer. Now let's turn the RGB visibility back on and turn the mask visibility back off. We can go ahead and switch back to the Layers tab, and we should now see our image showing a bit of transparency on the pixels. Now let's get rid of the mask. In the Layers window, select the mask and right mouse click on it. We should see a list of options pop up. Let's choose Apply Layer Mask. This should delete the mask layer and apply it directly to our image. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and hit File, Export, Quick Export. And now we're going to save it as blaze underscore metal underscore rough.png. Now that that's done, let's jump back into Unity. Let's open up our textures folder and we should see our new texture appear. Now let's select the metal rough texture. And in the inspector under alpha source, let's make sure it is set to from grayscale. Now we can assign that texture into our metallic channel. And we should see the change applied to our model. Now that we've got all that hooked up, let's go ahead and inspect our model. In this scene, let's double click on our model's geometry. In the inspector, we should see a list of blend shapes that came with him. Go ahead and grab a slider to test them out. Now, when I slide the slider back and forth, there seems to be something going on with his normals. Let's select our FBX in the asset folder. Under the Models tab, we should see a checkbox for Legacy Blend Shape Normals. Let's make sure that that's checked. Now we can go back to our blend shapes and test it again. It looks like it's doing pretty good. Let's go ahead and make a prefab of our model. I'm going to select the top of our model's hierarchy and drag it into its folder. Once done, let's hit Original Prefab. And now our model is done and is ready to go through the Massive Loop SDK process. When getting our character ready for the Massive Loop SDK process, the first thing we want to make sure of is that we have the Massive Loop SDK installed. Let's open up our browser. Let's go to www.massiveloop.com. Now we will need to sign into our account. Once done, at the top of the page, you should see an option for download. Let's click it. We should then see an option for Massive Loop SDK. Once selected, a new page will open up and we will see an option to download the Massive Loop SDK and an option to download the Unity version 2020.3.35 F1. Since we are assuming you already have Unity downloaded, go ahead and just download the Unity SDK. Once finished, drag and drop the SDK package into your Unity asset folder. A window will open showing you the content of the package. Go ahead and hit Import. Massive Loop should appear in the Unity toolbar. This means we have now successfully loaded the Massive Loop SDK. In the scene, let's go ahead and click on our Blaze character. In the inspector, let's go and add a component. Here, we can search for avatar descriptor. Once we find it, let's add it to our prefab. Once applied, we can see that some new game objects have been added to our character Blaze. We can also see some spheres, which we will call anchors, have been added in the scene. Let's start by clicking on the eye game object. In your scene view, roughly position the eye anchor around the area of our character's eyes. We will also want to move the anchor a bit in front of the nose, keeping it in front of any geometry. This is going to be the position of our camera. Next, let's select the left-hand anchor. This will represent your controllers, so we will need to position the anchor close to the area where the thumb meets the hand. We will also need to rotate the Y channel -90 and the Z channel -90. The anchor's Z positive axis should now point down the hand and the Y positive axis in the direction your character is facing. Let's go ahead and copy those values. In the upper right corner of our transform component, let's click on the More option. Here we can select Copy Component. Now in the Hierarchy tab, let's select our left laser anchor. Under Transform Component, let's click the More option. Now let's hit Paste Component Values. All right, let's finish up by positioning the left laser start anchor to be more at the tip of the index finger. The last anchor we will look at is the seat anchor. This anchor depicts the point where your avatar will be seated when using stations in Massive Loop. So let's select the seat anchor and position it around the pelvis and close to the upper thighs. Great. Now let's adjust our bounding box. An easy way to do this is by turning our camera into isometric mode. Now let's switch to front view. We can now see and adjust our bounding box accurately to our character. Okay, great. With Blaze selected in the scene, let's go to the inspector. Under the playable layers, we can see there are 2 slots open for controllers. If we hover over the base layer text, we will see a quick tip appear. This slot will hold the Massive Loop default locomotion controller. Let's select the circle and find the ML default locomotion controller and select it. We can now see it appear in the slot. Let's do the same for the second layer. It looks like this slot is for hand animations. Go ahead and select the circle and pick the ML default hand controller. It should appear in this slot as well. Okay, we can now move on to our blink property. Under blink mechanic, let's hit the drop down arrow. Now Massive Loop wants to know, how will our character's blink be controlled? Let's go ahead and select blend shape. For the skin mesh renderer, we will need to have the mesh that holds the blend shapes. So let's select our Blaze mesh and drag it onto that slot. Next, let's look at blink blend shape property and select the drop down arrow. Scroll down until we find eye blink. Once selected, we will keep its default values and move on to eye fixation. Under the fixation properties, we will find fixation mechanic. Let's hit the drop down arrow. We can see different options on how to control the eyes. Our avatar eyes are driven by joints, so we will need to select the bone transform. We should see some empty slots saying left eye and right eye appear. This is where our joints will go. So under our avatar's hierarchy, let's expand it until we locate the eye joints. Once we find them, we can drag the left and right eye joint into their respective slots. Once done, we are now ready to set their eye look limits. In the max look right property, let's click on modify. We need to figure out which axis rotates the eyes to look right. In our case, that's the Y channel. Let's put in a value of about 22. Now let's go ahead and uncheck the modify button and move on to max look left. We're going to click on modify. Here we can apply the opposite value of the left eye for the right eye. Go ahead and uncheck modify. For max look up, click on modify. And in the X channel, let's add a value of about -10. That seems to look pretty good. Let's uncheck modify, and let's do the same for max look down. Modify, and about a value of 10. And uncheck modify. Great, we have just finished our fixation values. We are now ready to work on our visemes. In the mouth properties section under mouth simulation mechanics, let's hit the drop down arrow and choose visemes, blend shapes. Much like the blink, we will need to select the mesh that has the blend shapes on them. Let's go ahead and select our character's mesh and drag it into the viseme skin mesh slot. Once done, let's hit the detect button. The Massive Loop SDK will try and detect visemes for us. In some cases, not all will be correct. In that case, we can easily go to the slot affected, hit the drop down arrow, and select the ones that correspond to that slot. Great, once we got all our visemes hooked up, we can hit check performance. The Massive Loop SDK will process our avatar, and if everything is green, we can move forward. Before we leave the inspector, we have one more thing to check. If we scroll to the top, there we will see a property that reads Overrides. Let's hit the drop-down arrow. At the bottom, let's hit Apply All. Because we are not working in prefab mode, we will have to perform this action in order to save all the changes we made to our prefab. Let's save our file, and we are now ready to upload this avatar. Before an avatar can be uploaded into Massive Loop, a unique profile or container for that avatar must be created. To do so, we'll need to open our browser and go to www.massiveloop.com. Here we can sign into our account. Once signed in, navigate to the button that says Massive Loop. If we hit the drop-down arrow, we should see a selection for avatars. Click on it. This should pop up a page that displays the current uploaded avatars. On the left, you should see an option labeled My Avatars. If we click on it, the page will show all the avatars you have uploaded through your account. This makes it extremely easy to find and edit your avatar's profile. If we look to the top right, we'll see a button that says Create Avatar. Let's go ahead and hit that. We can now fill out some general information about our avatar, like avatar's name. For consistency, we'll call ours Blaze. Under category, we'll say human. And under description, you can write anything you feel that will accurately describe your avatar. Once finished, let's click Create. The profile is created, and we can now add a few more features to our avatar's profile. We can upload a thumbnail. Now, I have already made a quick JPEG of Blaze, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Browse. I'll select the file and hit Open. Now, if we hit the Update button, we should see our thumbnail appear. We can also choose a status for our avatar. Click on Change/Publish. Under New Status, let's hit the drop-down arrow. Since this is the first time to upload this character, I will set the status to private. This will make it so that only I can select him in the Massive Loop Metaverse. After our character is tested and everything works fine, we can come back later and update the status to public. Let's go ahead and jump back into Unity. Navigate to Massive Loop on the Unity toolbar. Here we will find the control panel. Click it. You will be prompted to log into your Massive Loop account. Once finished, we can find the avatar icon and select it. If we look at the top, we can see which avatar is current. If you need to select another profile, you can always hit Change. We now need to tell the SDK which avatar's prefab we would like to associate to this profile. So click on Select Avatar Prefab. Find the Blaze prefab and select it. We can now hit the Build and Upload button. The SDK will begin uploading our avatar to the Massive Loop Metaverse. What do you say we go check it out? Great. Once in Massive Loop, we can go to Avatars and select our character. And it looks as if our character is working pretty good. So thank you guys for spending the time to go through the Ready Player Me to Massive Loop pipeline. I will look forward to seeing you in the Massive Loop Metaverse and seeing what remarkable avatars you create.